Hi everyone. I want to thank Susie Kopecki and Stephanie Robb for making this all happen, and so we can have a Constitution Day like we do every year. So my name is Jessica Scarf, and I teach political science here at Allen Hancock College. And I am going to try to respond to some of the questions that students have submitted. Many of the questions are actually about the coming presidential election and not the Constitution, but that's fine, and I'm just going to do my best to answer them. So the first question was, can the president delay the election? And the answer to that should be very simple: no. The power to set the election day belongs to Congress in the Constitution, and the Constitution says that that needs to be the same day across all of the United States. So the president doesn't have that power. The second question is basically, how long does it take to make an amendment to the Constitution? And the answer to that really varies. And I'll just give two contrasting examples. So right after the Civil War, three amendments to the Constitution, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, were all passed and ratified in a 5-year time period. And that's really unusual, right? By contrast, the 19th Amendment, which guaranteed the right of women to vote, took almost 100 years, really, from the proposal, the idea, back in 1848, Seneca Falls, all the way to the ratification in 1920. So constitutional amendments generally take a while unless there's some sense of urgency. And what creates that sense of urgency is a little bit hard to predict. The last time the Constitution was amended was before many, if not most, of our students were born in 1992. So we don't do it very often. It doesn't happen frequently, and it's very difficult to do. The third question is whether the president can change or rewrite the Constitution. And that's a simple one: no. Absolutely not. To amend the Constitution, the normal process is that there's a proposal that is approved by 2/3 of both chambers of Congress, and then ratified by 3/4 of the states. So it's often that second phase that is really difficult. So the example I would give of that is something called the Equal Rights Amendment, which did pass through both chambers of Congress, but did not get ratified by 3/4 of the states in the time period that was allotted. So the Equal Rights Amendment has not actually been officially ratified because of that. Another question was, what's the most important article in the Constitution? And I thought that was a great question, but it's sort of impossible to answer. So I guess what I would suggest is that everybody looks at the Constitution themselves and thinks about each article, and then maybe what's most important within each article. I guess that's one way you could do it, but I don't think we could pick just one, right? Article 1 deals with the powers of Congress, Article 2 deals with the powers of the presidency, and Article 3 deals with the judicial branch, so they each have very important things inside of them. The next question is about historic violations of the Constitution. And that's also a little bit tricky because, to some extent, violating the Constitution is a subjective matter because we don't all interpret the meaning of parts of the Constitution in the same way. And I think one of the most obvious examples of that is with the 14th Amendment. And that was one of those amendments that I mentioned earlier that was passed just after the Civil War. So the 14th Amendment has a lot in it that's very important, including birthright citizenship and so on. But the other really important piece of the 14th Amendment is the idea that we all have the right to due process and equal protection of the law. And that protection applies to all persons. It's not just for citizens, it's for all persons in the United States. So I think that that is a place where we have seen repeated violations, right? So we can point to, obviously, segregation. And in fact, both the Supreme Court case that upheld racial segregation, Plessy versus Ferguson, and the Supreme Court case that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson and said segregation was unconstitutional. Both of those were different interpretations of what equal protection means in the 14th Amendment. More recently, we can look to the LGBTQ rights movement, and, for example, the right to marry for same-sex partners. So in 2015, the Supreme Court decided that it would be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause to not allow same-sex couples to have a marriage license and all the rights that come along with that. And then if we go farther back, we could look at World War II and the internment of Japanese Americans. So they, without due process, right? They were forced to close their businesses, leave their homes, and go into camps and so on without due process. And they were not only persons in the United States, but most of them were American citizens. So violations of the Constitution do happen, but often they become a matter of opinion, and only with hindsight do we have sort of universal understanding that they are in fact violations. All right. The next question is about how to stay informed for the elections. And I am a big advocate of seeking out news that is not designed for profit. Most of the news online, on television, and so on is designed as a product for profit. And they know who their customers are, their audience, and they're sort of delivering a product to suit their audience. So I prefer news sources that are not developing and producing their news programs based on the idea of a consumer product, but rather on journalism. And most of those sources are not for profit. So a couple of my favorites, National Public Radio and PBS. And they might not be as exciting and sensational and so on and dramatic, but they are good journalism. The other thing I would suggest is just to try to get a varied diet, you know, like we do with our food. Try to get various sources from different points of view if you're going to look at news sources with points of view. Try to get a variety so you're hearing different things. And always ask yourself, should I double check that? Right? I think that's really important. And the next question is about polling places versus mail-in ballots for the 2020 presidential election. And there has been a lot in the news about this and quite a bit of confusion. And it's going to vary state by state. So states get to decide how they handle elections. In California, you should have the option to go to to a polling place. It might not be the one you always go to, but to a polling place. But you also have the option to vote by mail. So both of those options will be available to you in California. And I'm going to give you a website to go to at the end of the presentation today. A related question was whether we should worry about mail-in ballots and whether it's a problem to question the legitimacy of mail-in ballots. And I do worry about that. I think that any attempt to throw doubt on the election process, unless there's real evidence to have that doubt, is problematic. So we don't have any serious evidence of voter fraud by mail and things like that. So please feel secure in the voting system. Follow the rules, fill out the ballot the way you're supposed to. Get it if you're going to mail it, get it in the mail on time and all of that. But I would not worry about fraud. That's not a concern. There's no real evidence that is a statistically important concern. Another question is, does the presidential election really matter? And I think it does. And let me tell you why.